Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So this morning I was on TikTok and I came across a video of Umar Johnson talking about voting. And basically in his video, he said that nobody cares if black people vote. He said that white people don't care if black people vote. He also went on to say that if voting could affect change, it would be illegal. Then he went on to say that it's movements that affect change, not politicians, not voting. And so this is what I have to say about that. First of all, as we all know, it was illegal for black people to vote in this country for many years. First of all, we were enslaved for hundreds of years in this country, and we were not recognized as even human beings, much less citizens with the right to vote. And even after slavery, we were denied the right to vote for a very long time. Even when we were given the right, technically on paper, there were efforts made to prevent black people from exercising that right to vote. You had literacy tests, you had poll taxes, and you had terrorist organizations that terrorized the black community in order to prevent black people from voting. Terrorist groups like the KKK would lynch black people for pressing for their right to vote. So obviously, our right to vote mattered to those people. They wanted to do everything that they could to prevent us from voting because they knew that once black people had the right to vote, it would be an end to these Jim Crow laws that were in place. The laws that degraded and dehumanized black people. They knew that we could affect change. So they did everything to prevent us from exercising that right to vote. And Umar Johnson says that people don't care about us exercising our right to vote today. So if that were true, why is it that they went all the way to the Supreme Court to gut the Voting Rights Act, Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act, a key provision that called for pre-clearance of certain jurisdictions with a historic legacy of denying black people to vote, the right to vote. So if our votes didn't matter, they wouldn't go all the way to the Supreme Court to gut the Voting Rights Act. If our votes didn't matter, after that act was gutted, you wouldn't have all these jurisdictions around the country trying to suppress the black vote by passing all these laws to make it more difficult for African Americans in particular to vote. You wouldn't have that if they didn't, quote unquote, care about us exercising our right to vote. And if they didn't care about our right to vote, Congress would have long passed laws or reforms to address the horrendous decision that the Supreme Court made in the Shelby County versus Holder case, where they gutted the Voting Rights Act. To this day, Congress has not passed the voting rights reforms that we need to see. So our votes do matter, and these people do care about us exercising our right to vote. The other thing is this. Umar Johnson talked about how it's movements that affect change. And yes, movements do affect change, but change doesn't happen by movement alone. Ultimately, politicians have to pass laws to affect the kind of change that we want to see in this country. Even Umar Johnson acknowledged that it was members of Congress that passed the Voting Rights Act. So you wouldn't even have a voting rights law the Civil Rights Act. You wouldn't have a Civil Rights Act if it wasn't for members of Congress actually writing that act and putting it in for a vote and actually voting for it and implementing it and enforcing it. You wouldn't have that if it wasn't for elected officials. And we have to understand that elected officials pass laws that impact our lives in every imaginable way. Without members of Congress, you wouldn't have a Voting Rights Act. You wouldn't have a Civil Rights Act. You wouldn't have a Fair Housing Act. You wouldn't have all of these laws on the books that are designed to address the issue of discrimination in this country. And no one is saying that movements aren't important. Movements are vital. We need movements. We need movements to apply pressure to these elected officials to make sure that they pass the kind of progressive laws that we need to see. We need to have movements put pressure on these politicians, and we need to have organizations that have agendas and that enforce those agendas and hold these politicians accountable for adhering to that agenda. If a politician doesn't support the black agenda, they don't deserve the black vote. And if a politician promises to implement certain laws and they fail to do so, then they need to be voted out, just like any other group of people do. All these different interest groups, they lobby and organize around the issues that matter. And if politicians don't adhere to their agenda, there are political consequences for that. And black people need to realize that as well. Nobody is saying that all we need to do is vote and chill. Go to a voting place, a polling place, and just cast a vote, and that's the end of the process. Hell no, that's not what we're saying. That's a part of the process. And it's up to us to make sure that these politicians implement the kind of laws that we want to see enacted, just like these other groups do. They don't, just vote. They put money behind candidates. They vote against candidates and support ads against candidates that oppose their agenda. And we need to do the same thing. And there are some groups that are doing those types of things, but we need more of it in our community. We don't need somebody basically encouraging black people not to vote, downplaying the importance of voting when our ancestors and our elders fought for that right. Were jailed for that right. Some of them were killed for that right. And it's not just about that history. It's about how it impacts our lives today. Again, these policies affect every aspect of our lives. Workers' rights are affected by policy. It's because of policy that we have a minimum wage in this country. It's because of policy that we have laws about overtime, as another content creator pointed out. All these basic rights, family leave and stuff like that. Laws that prohibit people from discriminating against individuals in employment. None of that would have been possible without members of Congress and people on the state level passing various laws to prohibit those forms of discrimination. So those are my thoughts. Tell me what you all think. Please rate, comment, subscribe, like the video, share the video, and hit that notification bell so that you'll know when I post new content. Peace and blessings. Have a great day.